Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you're coming again, if you're new here, welcome in. Today let's talk about CNA stuff. Let's talk about some challenges you faced as a CNA, that I faced as a CNA, and how did you deal with those challenges. When I was a CNA, I was 19 years old and it was my first CNA job. It was my first real job out in the real world. I had worked in video stores, done some fast food and things, but I was 19 and I took a class with a bunch of other people. They had this program where they would pay for you to become a CNA if you agreed to work for the company for a year. And I had family and friends that were CNAs, so that's what I did. The first time I worked as a CNA was on night shift. And before I was certified, this is one of the challenges that I see as a nurse looking out at CNAs and the helpers. So before you become certified, there are certain things that you can do and certain things that you cannot do. When I worked night shift and when I was learning to be a CNA, I remember the pressure on me to help the CNAs on the floor, but legally I was not supposed to do that. And there was a lot of pressure on me, and the CNAs were angry that I was even there. I was there to pass ice, answer call lights, make beds, those sorts of things. Clean wheelchairs. On night shift, you get extra duties like washing wheelchairs, so you clean them in the shower. Yes, the staff at the facility washes the wheelchairs, and it usually falls to night shift, and night shift is what I did. So before I was able, you have to check off on things to be able to do them when you're learning to be a CNA. Before I was certified to be a CNA, I had to check off in class and have so many hours of experience doing something before I could practice it at work, which made CNAs angry. Are you like this as a CNA? Have you experienced this as a CNA coming in? When you're in high school, I know they offer classes for this to be a CNA, and you come in as a helper, essentially. And your job is to, again, answer the call lights, pass waters, help disinfect equipment, make the beds. You can wheel people to the dining room and those sorts of things if you're working a day shift. But on night shift, it's really, it's rounds. You're checking people, changing them, turning and repositioning, and then in the morning, you're getting people out of bed. I was not experienced in that, and I wasn't legally allowed to do that, but it was expected of me. I did get to where I would help hold people over or something when I was going through that many years ago. Again, I was 19. But I remember how ugly and mean people could be to me when I was learning. And so I hope that I'm not that way to people who are learning, because it surely doesn't make you want to learn, does it? And when people are short with you, rude with you, unwelcoming, it doesn't make you want to do the job. Believe me though, CNAs are very necessary and needed. So I wish that more CNAs that are experienced would think of this. They say nurses eat their young, but nurses are not the only people doing this. People in nursing and healthcare are doing this to other workers. I just want to say that anything that I say on my channel is just my opinion and my personal experience. It's not medical advice. It's not legal advice. It's none of those things. Strictly my opinion and my experiences. So take what resonates with you and leave what doesn't, like the psychics say. But anyway, back to CNA stuff. When you're learning and you're fresh in the business, you really need people to help you learn calmly. Screaming at people, belittling them, being impatient with them, it does not help them want to be a part of your team. And we all had to start at the bottom. We all had to learn at one time or another. If you don't know how to do something and you're learning how to do it, you really do have to get some practice in before you can turn and reposition people. CNAs who have been doing this for years, they can do a bed change in a very short amount of time. I, as a nurse who does not do bed changes all the time, I'm very slow at it. I can do it. I know how to do it, but I'm not as fast as the CNAs that have been doing it for years. And what I will say is, when people come in fresh, young or old, whatever it may be, wherever they're starting in their journey, it's important that we are welcoming to them as CNA and healthcare workers, right? But I'm specifically saying CNAs. I remember, that experience with working in the nursing home, and I did work in that nursing home when I became certified as well. What I remember is I really began to like the people that I worked with that were in the class with me, and we developed a good teamwork. As CNAs on the night shift, you're really working with a skeleton crew. We really are. You don't get as many CNAs staffed in the building at night. It is a much different ratio for nurses and CNAs. So you really kind of have to work together. And I think the challenge in training new CNAs and people coming in that are not able to help you do what you need help with, the challenge is that sometimes you're already feeling overwhelmed as a CNA. You already have 10 or 12 or 15 patients to yourself, and you already are in a time crunch to get things done. Now, I will say the night shift, the time crunch isn't the same on nights as it is on days. On day shift, the CNA is getting people breakfast, putting them back to bed, showering them, working around therapy. They're getting them up for lunch, putting them back to bed, doing the cares that they need to do for the patients, residents, whatever it may be. They're doing the get-ups and get-downs a couple times a day. And then they're sometimes getting people up for dinner before they go home. And in the evening shift, you have that meal to get through. So night shift is basically turning and repositioning, and in some facilities, getting certain people up for their meals. In fact, sometimes facilities expect the night shift to get the whole hallway up, or the one assists, or whatever it may be. But on night shift, your main duty is going to be things like turning and repositioning people every 2 hours, and at least every 2 hours. Some people need more, but at least every 2 hours, you're turning and repositioning people. Again, you're probably having some chores and duties that day shift doesn't have, such as disinfecting wheelchairs, walkers, any equipment that's used, anything that would be in the dirty, soiled utility room. I know one of the things that I didn't love about being a CNA in a long-term care setting, because that's where my experience is that you have to rinse the pads before you put them in the laundry if somebody has a BM. And that's something that takes a little bit of learning too, to not splash it on yourself. I wish that people had been more patient when I was learning. I did learn how to do my job as a CNA, and I did work other shifts. But primarily, I preferred midnights for my life and the things that I had going on. But I did work other shifts, and it was hard to work day shift as a CNA. It was hard to work in the evening shift. And the one thing that I would say to you as a CNA coming in, if you need help, ask for it. If people are being rude with you and they're not helping you and they're kind of leaving you hanging and doing the things that happen sometimes when you're the new kid on the block, you should talk to your supervisor about it. Absolutely. I'm always going to reiterate that you should always go to your supervisor if there's an issue. Obviously, sometimes you can work it out amongst yourselves, and you should, as adults, be able to say, hey, what's going on? Do we have a problem? Not solving things with, aggression, but you guys should be able to talk to each other professionally as CNAs. I wish, again, that when I became a CNA, that people had been more patient and less hateful, that they would have taught me ways to make my job easier. Now, people did do that eventually. I sometimes got put on a hallway at night where certain groups of people were used to working together and they had a good system, and when I came in and I had to cover for that person, it would jack their whole system up and it would make them angry. But I remember working with CNAs that were probably closer to my age now when I was 19, and she said, listen, you've got to help me lift or I'm going to hurt my back and you're going to hurt yours. So she taught me the proper way. You learn in school. You learn in school how to lift a 2-person lift, okay? And sometimes you're going to have to scoop people up in bed by yourself. If they're small enough, and you're on the hall by yourself, sometimes you do end up scooting people up in bed by yourself. Are you supposed to do that? Not in an ideal world. Not in an ideal world. You're supposed to be getting help. I saw recently where a CNA said one thing that made them angry was when a CNA would ask them to help with the lift and they weren't already on the Hoyer pad. And okay, If it's a person that you can turn and reposition by yourself and get the Hoyer pad under them, great. If you're able to get them dressed and ready and on the Hoyer pad, and then you just asking for the person to lift, because truly you need 2 people for a Hoyer lift. 2 people for a Hoyer lift. Don't do it by yourself. But my problem with that statement is that if a person is a to assist to get out of bed and they need a Hoyer, it's very possible that you can't turn them without some assistance too to get that pad under them. Now, I'm not saying that's the case all the time, but I just think you should think about where a person is at in their ability level. And, you know, if you work together, the day goes faster, the night goes faster. It really does go better if you work together. I know that we get into habits as CNAs on the floor. We get into a routine where we know Miss Johnson needs to get up first because she takes forever to get ready in the morning, and we need to get started by a certain time. And if we get off track with that, it's going to mess up maybe our whole morning. And we know when that next shift comes in, they have expectations that you've gotten those things done that were assigned to you. But in the real world, these are people we're taking care of. They're not robots. You can't have the same schedule every day with these people. Is it good to have a routine and a plan? Absolutely, it's good because it keeps you organized and it keeps you on task. It's also good to be able to understand that that plan is going to change. It's not always going to be a day where you've gotten every task done that was assigned to you. And that's just the way it is in healthcare. It's a 24-hour business. It's a 24-hour facility. We are taking on responsibilities as CNAs. Now, I have been the nurse that did walking rounds behind people and found people that weren't changed. And I have had to ask CNAs to go back and change a person before they could leave the building. If a nurse doesn't do walking rounds with a CNA, you're going to find somebody who's maybe very wet. So I think it's important that if you didn't get everybody out of bed, you at least did a round and made sure everybody was dry, and you did walking rounds. CNAs should do walking rounds together just like nurses. It's important that you're looking at those people together so that I know you feel like you don't have time for that, but I promise you if you don't do that, you're going to be coming to me as your nurse telling me that so-and-so did not do their rounds, and I'm going to ask you, did you do walking rounds together? Because I promise you as a nurse, I would be asked the same thing when I'm taking on a shift or taking on a new assignment for the day. I promise you that if you're not doing walking rounds together and something goes wrong, your supervisor is going to ask, did you do walking rounds at the beginning of the shift? And that is critical. It's critical as a CNA and as a nurse. But as a CNA, it gives you good peace of mind that people were dry when you started your shift. Now, you know, sometimes they did a round an hour ago and people are wet again. And you know what? You can tell. You can tell if they've been wet for hours or if they just wet. And that's just, unfortunately, you're not going to come in to everybody being dry when you come in to start your day because people don't pee on a schedule. They don't have BMs on a schedule. They urinate and have BMs on their body's schedule. So understand that too. You can't have an expectation that you're always going to walk into a perfectly clean and dry situation. It would be wonderful if that was, you know, that you walked into mostly everybody was dry. It would be great. It would be an ideal day if you walked into everybody being clean and dry and ready to go. Sometimes that's just not the case because people don't urinate on your schedule. And you can think about this too. Maybe when those CNAs did their rounds, you know, maybe the person was dry. That happens too. I've been on the floor. I've worked as a CNA. I have done rounds and a person was dry when I was doing my rounds. And you know, you don't have time to go back and check again until your next round sometimes, especially if you're working day shift. You've got those meals in, you've got therapy in, you've got showers you've got to do. How many facilities really have a shower aid? Not every facility. It's wonderful when they do, but the reality is sometimes you're doing showers and feeding people and getting them up and putting them to bed and doing all the things. So I say that the good thing to do is to be flexible, be patient with your newbies. They're learning too, and if you train them well, they'll do a good job. If you train them the right way to do it, and you help them get through those first days and those first weeks of their job, and you get them through the hard parts, they'll do a good job and you'll make a good team. But if you are not patient and kind and working with people as a group, you're going to have a rough day. You're going to have a rough day because it goes by better if you're working together. It just does. I've worked shifts as a CNA when I've been on my own completely and I had a rough day. And I've been on shifts where I had a partner, and it was wonderful. Everybody is not a one assist. You're going to have to help your partner across the way with 2 assists. It's not their choice. You, number one, need to protect your back. You need to protect your back. You need to protect yourself from injury. You also need to protect your patient from injury, because if you're doing it by yourself, you can hurt the patient and yourself. It's really just a way to protect everybody all the way around. So understand that there are times when you're going to have to help others, and there are times when others are going to have to help you. I enjoyed my time as a CNA. I feel like it was a very important part of my career. I feel like it was a piece that made me understand CNAs as a nurse. I think it's important that nurses do have an understanding of what a CNA is responsible for. It's hard work. And maybe Miss Johnson don't want to get up today. You know, maybe she is being very difficult with you today. She's slapping you, she's kicking, she's biting, she's cussing. You have days like that too, where Mrs. Johnson is not her usual self. You know, so I would say as a CNA, plan for the unexpected, work together, and be kind. Always be kind. That's my advice. Just my opinion, just my thoughts on the matter, and just my experience personally. What are some things that you've experienced as a CNA on the floor? What are some things that made you want to or not want to work as a CNA? What are some things that made you work well together as a team? How did you experience your first days as a CNA? I would love to hear about it in the comments. And if you like what I'm talking about here, I would love it if you liked, subscribed, and followed. And I hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.